Hello, let me tell you about the 6 books I read in August. Chronologically, those were When Dimple Met Rishi. This first book that I read was coincidentally also the one I liked the least. The premise is cool. Rishi and Dimple, two American teenagers about to start college, are set up by their traditionally Indian families to meet at a summer college prep course. The plan is that they should get married. This is an arranged marriage concept, making this more complicated than it is. And then a love story develops nevertheless. The idea was cool. I really liked, on the one hand, the whole theme of family values, religious values that are held, clashing somewhat with the sort of modern day and growing up as a teenager in America. I also thought it was really cool, the female character Dimple is super driven, super smart, wants to become an engineer, and she believes that she must choose between this high-flying career on the one hand or a sort of love, relationship, family on the other. And those two ideas wrapped up in a YA book I thought were cool. I just thought the whole teenager angsty love story kind of threw a shadow on those themes, and they weren't actually explored that much. I thought most of the problems that came up could have been dealt with really quickly if people had just talked, opened their mouths. And that's something I quite often struggle with. Even though I know that as a teenager I was probably similarly shut off with what I believed in and thought about, and I was similarly angsty. Now, to a certain extent, I am less so. So I recommend this book for possibly a younger audience, even though I have heard others also my age not minding the tropiness of this teenage insta-love, but oh, I don't like my parents thing. Yeah, the second one I read, although possibly also targeted at a younger audience, it was totally different. I read the second book in a 2-book series by V.E. Schwab. This one called Dark Duet. This is the second book. The first one was This Savage Song. And I can't tell you much because it's the second book. Just maybe that I think I enjoyed it even more than the first. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Now thinking about it, I think I just did that because I wanted to seem highbrow, because this book is just fun. It's set in the world that we've already encountered in the first book, where monsters roam free, and our 2 protagonists, I think it's Kate and August, have to fight to stay alive, basically, similarly to in the first part, but the storyline has developed, things have changed in the city that they both call their home city, and it sort of follows the question of sort of the monster in everyone, which I thought was really cool, and I enjoyed it loads. It's really fun, and I'm a little sad that this seems to be the last one, it only being a 2-book series. So go ahead and read the first one, and if you didn't like that, well, the second one is even better. Then I went on to read the book Not Working by Lisa Owens. This one I picked up mainly because it appealed to my quarter-life crisis self. It follows Claire, I believe she was called, who has just quit her job because she wants to find her true calling and her passion in life. I don't actually remember whether it's mentioned in the book how old she is, but I reckon she's 30, late 20s, something like that. And she has this wonderful, super achieving doctor husband, and she has kind of hilarious parents, and now she just retreats to lying at home being a slob, sort of applying to 1 or 2 job applications every other week, and just falling into this almost self-inflicted ennui. It really appealed to me. I could really relate to loads of little aspects that were brought up in the book. The whole book is written, I thought, in quite a fun way. It's little vignettes, just little snippets of her day, little thoughts she has, things she sees going on around her, relationships, parties, job thoughts, life thoughts. I really liked it. I think I am the perfect target group, and I can see how maybe someone who isn't in that point of life would find the main protagonist terribly obnoxious and just shake their heads at her first world problems. I, on the other hand, enjoyed it. I thought it was funny, and it was a really easy read that at the time made me feel less alone. Then, because I was still on the look for books that I would just sort of speed read through and enjoy, I read the first book in a series called The Chronicles of Ixia, I don't know how to pronounce that, by Maria Snyder. Oh yeah, this first book was called The Poison Study. I read it because I was watching a video by Reagan on, what is the channel called? Peruse Books, something like that. And she said it was super fun, and the synopsis appealed to me. It's about Yelena, the main protagonist, gets offered the job of the Commander General's food taster on the day that she is supposed to be executed. So, favouring uncertain potential death through poisoning over certain immediate hanging, she chooses the job. And we find out about this world that it's set in, where a sort of military regime now rules over a land that was once ruled by a sort of mix of obnoxious royals and magicians. Although I think we will find out much more as the series continues. We also find about Yelena's past, which is quite dark and brutal. And even though this is, I think, marketed as YA, I thought some of these sort of backflashes of her previous life that end up, make her end up where she does in a prison cell for having killed someone, I thought were really quite explicit and brutal. I was surprised by them. I don't mind that in a book, but someone might be taken by surprise by those. There's also a love story, which I didn't love. I liked all the side characters loads, and I'm more curious to see if they pop up again in the next books. There's the love interest, though, of Yelena. I didn't care about too much, and I found myself sort of wishing there was less time devoted to the pining and lusting over him. I was more interested in sort of finding out her story, and felt like he was holding her back almost a little bit. I felt like she didn't really need someone to save her, so that took away a bit from the sort of strength of that main character. But I really enjoyed it, even though I thought there were a few problems with the plot. It's also the first one in a series, and I think I will read on, which is probably the best praise you can give to the first book in a series. Then the last two I both have in physical form, and they were both published in the 60s, which is relatively unusual for me. I tend to read more recent publications. The first one is Turkish Delight by Jan Wolkers. This I got from my boyfriend. This is the English translation by Sam Garrett. You should always also give the translator some love. So this originally is a Turkish novel called Turks Vooruit, but because my Dutch is not great, my boyfriend was kind enough to gift it to me in English. This was quite outrageous when it was published in, I think, 69, because it's incredibly explicit and there's lots of sexy scenes. It follows the account of a sculptor, which the author is also a sculptor of this book, which made me wonder how much of this was actually autobiographic and how much wasn't. How he basically mourns the end of his relationship to the love of his life, and talks about all the sex he's had with all the women. This was a quick read, and I'm not very shocked by explicit sex scenes. You shouldn't read this if you are. Although I should say that this is apparently talked about quite often in Dutch high schools. So this doesn't mean that this is necessarily appropriate for every young reader. It just means that the Dutch trust their teenagers to deal with all the explicit sex. I did find myself sometimes being a bit annoyed by the repetitiveness of certain anecdotes. So it really did feel like listening to that friend of yours who just got dumped, and they keep on recounting the same stories over and over again because they're just obsessing and idolizing certain moments of that relationship when you know that's not the truth. And I felt the same with this. I felt like I was indulging in the main protagonist, letting him ramble, but also I never got my foot in to say, yeah, but wait a minute, that's not how it always was, right? So I only ended up giving this three stars on Goodreads, even though I do appreciate what it must have done at the time with giving all the readers in the late 60s the feeling that someone was actually talking about what they were perceiving and using a language that they used themselves, not some complicated intellectualization of young people. And then finally, the book I just finished yesterday, so on the very last day of August, was The Power of the Dog by Thomas, I don't know how to pronounce this, probably Savage. This again was published in, I don't want to say it wrong, 1967. And even though published in the same decade as Turks Fruit, this could not be more different. It is about two very different brothers who own and run a ranch in Montana. It explores all kinds of themes of family and the divide between rich and poor and upper class and working class. The story unfolds as the younger of the two brothers, who is the more good-natured of the two, marries a widow who has a teenage son, and they come to live with the brothers on the ranch, and that sort of stirs up some dirt. The older brother, who is not the most likable character, has his issues with that and plots to make the life of the widow a living hell, basically. It is really harrowing. I also really enjoyed the way the story is constructed. So even though it does linearly move in time, it is almost theatrical in how the different characters are introduced to us, then they meet, and then the ending reads as if it was very sudden, but if you've read it carefully, the author has taken has really taken time to prepare the ending, so it's not necessarily surprising. It wasn't to me, at least. I still have to think about this one a little bit, and it might be one of those books that I still bump up in my rating once that thinking has happened. But it was a great end to my reading month of August. I've got loads of books that I showed you in my last video that I'm really eager to read now. And I am currently reading a book for my book club, which I'm fearing I might not actually finish before we meet. That is The Sympathizer, which won the Man Booker Prize, I believe, last year? Year before? Confusing my prizes now, though. But that was all of it. I'll see you again soon. Yeah. Bye-bye.